Welcome to our third deep dive into the conscious co-creation tools, examining the conscious co-creation tools as lenses for viewing self-organization. So this is our third Advanced Insights video, and we're dealing with things that we can deal with and things that we can't. So the aims are to share experience and perspectives, to draw attention to critical issues and common errors, to offer deeper insights using a lens of conscious co-creation, to illustrate how things can go wrong and the consequences, to highlight critical success and failure points, and to draw attention to the dangers of inversions, which is good people versus unwise decisions. So here are the issues. Are we going to use a lens of personality and politics or structure and process? Because people can't control how they think, feel and behave, surely. And the answer is, well, if you can't, who else is going to do it for you? So the starting points from Deming. The big problems are where people don't realise they have one in the first place, and learning is not compulsory, neither is survival. And examples without theory teach nothing. This is quite a common one, which is structure aversion. And if you do the Myers-Briggs and the 5 aspects as tools for self-exploration, and there are behaviour tests online as well, then what you'll find is that perceivers are excitement seekers, the opposite to judges, structure planner organisers. And perceivers are averse to structure, to one degree or another, and they account for 2/3 of the population. And the implication is that 1/3 of perceivers are therefore highly to extremely anti-structure. And they'll typically say things like, we don't need structure, and then there'll be a rationalisation for it. And this really ignores the facts of nature itself. People are built of structure. Every cell of the body is about structure. Every molecule, every atom, the heart impulse, heart waves, they're all built on structure. Structure is the foundation for flow. So that perspective really completely ignores nature itself, which is built on the conservation of energy principle, physics and the universe. And normally, the anti-structure argument is simply dismissal without reflection. I believe the area does need some discernment, and that does rely on reflection. So, try a day without the place you keep your keys, your address book, language itself, grammar and alphabet, opening and closing times, context for anything and everything, purses, wallets and pockets, clothes themselves, the rules of the road, clocks, everything manufactured, the food logistics chain, timetables for buses, trains and planes, reminders, calendars and organisers, the electricity grid, appointments, even the financial system. So if you're just assuming that structure is stuff that gets in your road, then try eliminating it for a day. And hopefully you'll come up with some reasonable insights into how very important structure is for things to run. So there's going to be an experiment coming soon, which is the breakdown of the financial economic system, everything manufactured, the food logistics chain, prices and value of money, fuel, and the energy grid. Ask people in Venezuela, maybe, how that experiment has impacted them. So maybe it's very wise to consider structure more deeply before you dismiss it. The fact is that lack of structure involves a cost transfer, and that involves things like missing meetings and not catching up. The implication of that is that either the group has to redo items that they've discussed, which means that you're costing everybody else time, or you don't catch up, but then maybe you start inputting questions which have already been dealt with and things like that. Either way, there's a transfer of cost. And so there's a transfer of energy involved in that duplication, and the biggest impact is at the margins, and that means the people who are busiest pay the biggest price because you're costing them time which is already at a premium. The behaviours associated with this include springing things on supporters and helpers, and very often our flow is being supported by people who are doing backstop work for us constantly. And I think it's worthwhile asking those people about that. Okay, I admit I'm poor on structure and things like that. How does it impact you? Because typically, lack of structure means lack of reliability. And there's a cost for ourselves and for others in that. So is an underlying issue actually rigidity and inflexibility? Because perceivers can be controlling, not just judges. In fact, some of them can be some of the most controlling people around. And if other people constantly work around this, then they are picking up the cost for us, so there is no cost for ourselves. And in fact, the implications of that is that there are even great advantages to lack of structure. Why? Because the cost is constantly being transferred to other people. So one of the key indicators here is that even the word structure creates aversion or emotional kickback. And I think this requires a group discussion and some personal reflection. Systems need to be understood, and I'm actually the first person to suggest that they also need some flexibility. I'm often a person who's raising issues like this as the chair of a group, and I'm often trying to put in flexible solutions as well. The best solution is that everyone recognises the issues, people self-reflect, and they decide to change behaviours that impact others. So we've got some potential things that we can consider, because it's typically the same people who miss calls or miss meetings and don't catch up. And it's typically the same people who turn up late. So perhaps one of the possibilities could be, hey, we'll meet 5 minutes early, in which case we're structuring in a waste of time for other people. But it's a possibility. And most people, even judges, are prepared to be flexible. And in fact, it's very often underestimated how flexible they're being. Another one is if we have a group alignment process, such as a meditation or a social catch-up before we get on with the business, that we're all on time. And the big question there is, okay, we have an alignment process. Does the group see it as important? If it's not important, then maybe the ideal solution is to do away with it. Maybe people are budgeting for that alignment process, and we won't be getting into the substance of the meeting for 10 minutes. It doesn't matter if I turn up late. But the fact is that turning up late is then disruptive to that process. And if it is about group alignment, then we're having people stepping in who are not doing the alignment process. So I think the rigid approach is quite simply no latecomers. If you miss the alignment process or you interrupt it, you don't come in. But each group has to reflect on the issues and reflect on not just how they impact themselves, but they impact other people in the group as well, and the group field. So I think the most important thing here is a requirement for clarity, because ultimately I'm not supplying any hard and fast rules to anybody. You have to make it up for yourself. You have to decide what the issues are and how important they are. So what are the issues? Who do they impact? And how do they impact? And what's the best decision for the group on that basis? So yeah, rigidity is maybe the underlying issue. And the approach is maybe, this is me, I won't change. But there are underlying issues even beyond that, which is I will not question myself or question how my behaviour impacts others. I will not apply context to information, because the context is actually I'm transferring wastage of time to other people, maybe busy people. Here's another one. I can't or won't learn. Here's one of the rationales for that, which is everything is flow. Well, in fact, the real way of looking at this is everything is my flow, because I don't care about your flow or the group's flow. And maybe something underlying that is there's an I to the limit issue here. And that means there are no limits. And if there is no limit, I actually don't care how my behaviours impact others or reflect on how they impact me. So I think the bottom line is a lack of self-reflection here. How does this impact people? Do I really want to look at it? And if you want change, then the first thing to change, of course, is yourself. Here's another issue, tampering. I've heard this said as well, which is I don't understand how the conscious co-creation tools work, but I think we should be doing this instead or as well. One of the proposals coming off the back of that was subgroups should have total domain. And my response to that is, well, isn't it wise to understand before we change things? If we're saying implicitly we don't understand, or explicitly we don't understand how the conscious co-creation tools work, then we're blindly tampering with the system. Surely the first thing should be, well, how does this work and what is the impact of what I'm recommending? Because in fact, this is an inversion that inverts the collective consciousness, the mathematics, the bigger group dynamics. And in fact, it's fundamentally anti-democratic. Here's another one, which is spiritual superiority. And someone came into a group that I was involved with many years ago and said, "My angels say you are one of the keepers of the light." And I think it's important to keep your feet on the ground if you're a chair. People have said lots of flattering things and lots of less flattering things to me over the years. And the thing is, you have to be pretty much completely indifferent to all of it. And if you're not, ego can come into play, superiority, inferiority, things like that. You have to really be neutral and deal with things on the issues according to what is the right thing to do each and every time. And that means if you're doing that, then you're maintaining your sense of neutrality and you're not getting your personality or your ego involved in the stuff. This person later followed up and said, "My angels say buy Iraqi dinar and Vietnamese dong now." And here we are about 5 or 6 years later. So there was a team agreement with this person and some other people, and it was about connecting technologies to funding. And I got an email on a Sunday night, and the agreement had been, well, we're not going to take in business plans or anything. We're going to do our due diligence on this funding source, and we'll meet again to discuss it before we make any decisions. So the email arrived on a Sunday night saying, "Send me your business plans now." And my response was, actually, we have a team agreement in place. And that was met with, I think, wounded feelings, punctured ego, personality, projections, emotion, all the rest of it. But that was my job. We have team agreements, we have to support them, and they're there for a reason. And we've all agreed this stuff. So this person went off on their programs. It's very important in that case not to get involved in the Hall of Mirrors, because very often it's a group experience. It's more people jump in because they're triggered. It's like an emotional virus, effectively. So how should it work? Well, I asked the group, and the group came back and said, apologise. And in fact, I did, but I regretted it. I felt it was wrong. And in fact, if anything, it should have been the reverse. But I swallowed my pride and I apologised, even though I felt that, in fact, events eventually proved that I was completely correct, and people shouldn't have been sending in business plans. So the response was, after I apologised, well, that person went even further into their programs and projections. And there was a good, healthy dose or unhealthy dose of spiritual superiority about this. And eventually, one of the last messages was, my angels say you're the devil incarnate and the Antichrist. And that tends to raise a question in me, which is this a new set of angels? Or is it the old set of angels, in which case, at some stage, they've made a mistake? And those kind of basic questions don't seem to occur to people in those situations. So spiritual superiority for me is a very, very toxic thing I've seen on a number of occasions. The people who have it are pretty well untouchable in terms of their programs. If someone believes that they have a better or superior knowing or connection or anything else than anyone else, then it's the final bastion of ego, because it justifies any and all behaviours and responses. There is an ego connection to it, which means that there's a very powerful linkage to emotions and programs. Implicitly, there can be no level playing field because of that superiority, inferiority program that's playing. And let's face it, if they were really superior, then they wouldn't have powerful emotional connections to things. That's their delicacy of ego and their inferiority stuff being triggered when people don't want to play their game and dance around their superiority. So the general thing is, I know I have a special connection, and implicitly on that basis, you don't. So this is very, very toxic stuff. It's potentially narcissistic, and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it, apart from the person who's in possession of the spiritual superiority program. But everyone else can recognize it for what it is. And the bottom line is that if spiritual belief is used as a rationale for ego, personality and politics, then, believe you me, anything goes. And it often comes with a bag full of manipulative behaviours and projections. So what's the solution for the group and for the chair? It's always to be focusing on the intention, the structure and the process, not on personality or communication style. You can't fight anyone. All you can do is to focus on the team agreements and what we're here for. So that means the focus has to be to apply the processes and to support the chair in applying the processes. And ultimately, I think it helps to understand that the root issue is superiority, inferiority, and the solution is equanimity, which is don't look up to or down upon others. Treat everyone completely, equally, always. Bring your neutrality to the table, and instead of focusing on making decisions on feelings and emotions, make decisions on what is the right thing to do, and ideally, what is the right way to do it. If not, we end up with the whole group dancing around someone's programs. And the key failure points in this kind of situation are groups abandoning their values and processes in favour of those who are the most triggered, egotistical and emotionally charged. And very often, a big chunk or a whole group will just dance around their programs. So this also needs to be understood as a very powerful controlling position for the most triggered and or those in spiritual superiority. Because it means everyone ends up tiptoeing around their issues. Back to the structure issue, I met up with my mentor actually in the quality management world and in the model of sustainable organisation world, Tony Brown, who's now no longer with us, but he was a fantastic man, great mind, great philosopher, big-hearted, a great loss actually. He sat on the International Standards Board for Organisational Sustainability, and we worked together closely on the model of sustainable organisation. And I went to meet Tony one day, which involved about a half-hour walk, a 1 hour, 5-minute train journey, walk to the tube station, another 30 to 40 minutes of tube journeys, multiple changes on the underground system, and subject to delays as well. And then another, I think, 15 or 20-minute walk. So altogether, probably a journey of maybe approaching 2.5 hours, something like that. And I arrived late. I arrived probably about 15 or 20 minutes late, I think. And Tony, in his usual unflappable, ineffable way. As I apologised, said, lateness is ego. And not in a charged manner, but in a very straightforward, easygoing kind of manner, actually. And that gave me pause for thought. It seemed to be such an interesting thing to say. And I've come to the conclusion, after chairing groups for 23 years, that he's absolutely right. Because one person who's 10 minutes late when 6 other people are waiting for them is costing an hour in time for people. And it's typically not the kind of thing that happens once. It's the kind of thing that happens regularly. So unless those people really get the feeling for how they're impacting other people and groups, then undoubtedly the root cause of habitual lateness is ego. So here are the critical points. The team. Each member of the group not embodying, owning and understanding their processes and team agreements and why they're there and how they work and why they work. The next one is the chair not doing their job or not able to or not supported in drawing focus back, as they always should, to the processes and team agreements. The team mediator or counsellor not doing their job or unsuited to it. The questions that can't be asked in an organisation because people get triggered and emotional about them. And spiritual superiority and labelling, using phrases like my angels, my connection, my knowing, your divisiveness, your separation, etc. We need to remember this, that there are conflicts in values in organisations, and it's more or less an ongoing thing. People's programs versus processes, their feelings and emotions versus the group interest, doing the right thing, and the classic truthfulness versus agreeableness. It's disagreeable to people to speak the truth to them. But actually, if that's the case, then they should realise that actually you're honouring someone with your truth. And it takes a certain amount of courage to do that when it can be perceived as disagreeable by people whose world is drama and emotion, projection. So my conclusion is it's vital to focus on intention, structure and process, not personality and behaviourism. We can only control our own behaviours and keep the focus on the group field. It's vital to recognise the importance of these items and to understand how they work, which is a theory. It's vital to know our responsibilities to the team and its structure and processes, because if it's a collective exercise, we have responsibilities. And the most important things are the intention, structure and process. And if you think it's about emotions and feelings, then you'll quickly end up dancing around the people who are the most triggered and the most egotistical in the group. And then everything goes out the window. So it's also vital to understand the potential consequences of getting things wrong or inverted. And it's vital to consider the focus points, which is team agreements versus behaviourism, processes versus personality and ego. So my conclusion is that personal behaviours and habits impact groups, of course. The results are often surprising and unexpected. The outcomes are complexity. Where do we keep our focus? Do we get engaged on personal battles and turf wars and things like that? Well, no, we don't have to. We keep our focus on the group field, the structures and the processes, the team agreements. We need to be very aware of tampering and making exceptions, because if you make an exception for someone who's habitually late, then other people start to do it. And then how do you impose an equality baseline? You don't. Suddenly, everyone is making everyone wait, And again, the cost burden is on the people who are reliable, because it's unreliable if you're turning up late and missing meetings. And guess what? If you're not reliable, you can't be relied upon. And if you can't be relied upon, then it means that people end up losing trust in you. So beware of making exceptions, always focus on the processes and improving them. And it's important to understand the critical failure points and that you can only do your best using your map and compass. The other focus points are the Toltec Principles. Be impeccable with your word. Note the wording there, impeccable. That means realize how important it is to be trustworthy, to be reliable, to do the right thing, to stick to the agreements. And the next one is, don't take anything personally. Again, note the wording. It's very precise and clear. Don't make assumptions. You could even say, don't make any assumptions. Always do your best, and if you assume anything, assume everyone else does too. Be skeptical, but learn to listen, because that's usually the first thing that goes out the window when people are running on their programs, as well as the lack of ability to focus on structured process. So I think we need to bear in mind that co-creative groups provide freedom for people. But there's a flip side to everything. Freedom carries a weight of responsibility. If not, it's like, are you going to tidy up after yourself? Are you going to organize yourself? Are you going to clean up after yourself? If not, are we expecting someone else to do it? And we also need to understand the responsibilities of the chair and others in the group. And unless we understand how these things work, we can't embody the principles. And that's really necessary. So focus points, I think it's really important to reflect on everything you've learned. Consider how you can apply these new insights for yourself and for the groups you're involved with. Maintain your own frequency. And that means don't get engaged with people's programs on the same level that they manifest. Full stop. If things are not going to work out, recognize it. Find another path. There's no point in getting frustrated or triggered. If people want to have the full drama experience, they're welcome to it. And finally, don't be attached to the outcome. If you're attached to the outcome, you're going to feed drama. Avoid feeding drama. Keep your own inner balance and values. So remember, we can't know or shape how other people think or feel. And if we try, that's behaviorism. And it's not respecting other people's sovereignty, frankly. What we can look after is the group field. Be acutely aware of making assumptions and projections, because it's always guessing, even if the interpretations may appear to be obvious. By all means, be aware of a variety of assumptions, but avoid using any. Be aware that other possibilities exist, simply that, and return to the processes. So we can never deal with someone else's behaviours, only they can, but we can deal with our own assumptions and look after our own frequency and responses. And we can try and bring our assumptions into the open, as many as possible. So thank you for watching. Going further, we've got the MOSO resources, and you never change things by fighting the existing reality. Thank you for watching.